My name's Maxine. I'm a program coordinator in the Learning Abroad office, and I've also been advising students on scholarships during my time here. I am leaving the office pretty shortly, so that's why some of our new employees are here kind of to get the hang of things a little bit. So the first point that I want to address is why writing scholarship essays is difficult. A lot of students who are good writers, who are used to writing papers for school, who read a lot, things like that, still find it pretty difficult when they sit down and try and write a personal statement or essay about themselves. And so first I want to acknowledge that it is a tricky project. It can be pretty hard to write an essay about yourself, sort of identifying your strengths and things like that without feeling that you're being conceited or without feeling a little bit uncomfortable. So just kind of embrace that and you'll be able to move past it. And I always like to mention too that you're not being conceited or cocky when you spell out your strengths and the reasons why you are a strong candidate for the scholarship. That's what they're asking you to do, or even when you're writing, a personal statement or a cover letter for a job, that's what they're asking you to do. So don't feel shy about it. Another problem that students have a lot comes when scholarship prompts, essay prompts, will ask for very specific responses. The most common example that I've run into is with the Gilman Scholarship, which asks students to describe ways that they're diverse and how they're going to kind of increase diversity in study abroad programs. And that can be, again, a hard question for students to answer, especially like we were saying earlier, students who aren't, from an ethnic minority, they don't feel like they're really low on the, socioeconomic scale or things like that, because those are the first ideas that immediately pop into our mind when we're thinking about diversity. So just remember that everybody is special, and I know that it sounds really ridiculous, but it's true. Everyone has unique experiences, unique interests, things like that, that do make you an interesting and good candidate for a scholarship. So you don't have to be, kind of like fitting the very stereotypical bill of what a diverse student is to be able to bring something unique and diverse to the table. And that's what's hard, but that's also kind of what's cool about writing these sort of essays. Okay, so the first step in any writing process is understanding your project. So this is an example of the sort of things that you're going to want to think about and know about when you're working on a scholarship essay. So these two examples are the Gilman Scholarship and the Learning Abroad Merit Scholarship. Those are the most common ones that we have students applying for our office. But any scholarship that you are applying for, you'd want to make the same kind of list. So what are they asking of you? For the Gilman, for example, you know that you'll need to write 2 essays. One of them is a statement of purpose. And the other one is a follow-on project. So the points that I have listed underneath these are sort of the goal of the essay. So the goal of the Gilman statement of purpose, your goal should be to kind of personalize your application and to explore the impact of your learning abroad program and to introduce your diversity. So these are pretty general, but I definitely recommend that before you start writing anything, you make sure that you understand what it is that you're writing, what you're writing it for, what you want to achieve through writing that essay. And you'll see I have this link down at the bottom of all of the slides. This is a shameless plug for my blog, which is all advice about writing essays. And it's specific, most of it is specific to scholarship applications, but can be applied to other things as well. So I have a little bit more in-depth exploration on my blog about kind of identifying your audience or your reader and things like that, which are all part of this process. Okay, so now, did you guys get a chance to read the essay or kind of skim it that you feel like we could discuss it, or do you want another minute or two to look it over? What do you think? Another minute or two? All right, take a minute or two and maybe just come up with 2 or 3 things that you think are working in this essay. Okay, does anyone want to mention something that they thought was a strength of this essay? Sarah? Yes, thank you.
I felt like the content was really interesting and kind of eye-catching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wasn't super impressed with transitions
I
and
agree.
some stuff, but
Definitely.
content was really good.
Yeah, this is definitely an example of an essay that hits pretty hard on content-wise and doesn't hit as hard with writing skills. So it's an example of you don't have to write the next great American novel to receive a scholarship. This student did receive a full Gilman scholarship for his summer program. So I agree. I said the essay opens with an interesting but succinct discussion of the student's diverse background. So he jumps right in. He doesn't spend a lot of time kind of like, wading into the matter. He just jumps right in. I come from a background of mixed heritage. Right away, like, okay, the student has an interesting story and pretty easily is going to fit the bill of a diverse student. I also bolded at the bottom of this point here that he tells us just enough. One common flaw in scholarship essays, especially once you get going telling someone your story, is to overshare. And there's a few reasons why that can be dangerous. The first is every essay will have a length limit. And you don't want to go over it. Most readers just will stop at whatever the limit is. They're not going to keep reading. And they get frustrated. They don't think that you're showing kind of respect for their time that they're putting into reading your essay. So you want to make sure and respect the boundaries that they've given you. And it also can just get sort of boring with an overshare. And you, as a reader of an essay, you'll find yourself kind of wondering, why do I care? Like, oh, this is great, but why are you telling me this? So you want to make sure that everything that you mention in your essay has a point, and that it's pretty obvious to the reader what that point is right away. I also thought that this student did a very good job of tying in his Learning Abroad program with his life and his goals. It's pretty clear after you've read the essay why he's chosen the location in the program that he chose, and also what he hopes to kind of get out of it, or how he hopes to further develop his experiences after he is returned home. And that is something that every single Learning Abroad scholarship will want to see. So not all of the scholarship essays that you write are going to be specifically about diversity, but every single one should be in some way or another about why you've chosen the program and what it's going to do for you. And you don't need to sell your readers on the merits of learning abroad. Everyone who's reading an essay for these kind of scholarships is pretty well vested in the learning abroad sort of endeavor, and they understand, generally speaking, why they're valuable. What they want to know is, for you personally, why have you chosen your program, and what is it going to do for you? How is it going to kind of integrate with your overall academic career? How are you going to use the skills that you've learned, going on and pursuing a career after school, things like that. I also did think that the student did a good job editing this essay, so it doesn't feel overly wordy. There aren't any typos or grammatical errors, and it's well structured in the sense that he progresses overall pretty smoothly. So it kind of has a clear progression. But as Sarah mentioned, I definitely think that he could do with some more transitions. So you want your essay to flow not only from paragraph to paragraph, but also within the paragraphs itself, and this one can read kind of choppy. In my blog, I do have a really dorky video that I found online about transitions, but it kind of helps to get you thinking about why you use transitions and what transitions are available for you to use and things like that. Yeah, we don't need to spend any more. If anyone wants to talk later about more things that I thought this essay could improve upon or anything like that, I have some more notes, but we'll move on at this point. Okay, so now that you sort of have that little inspiration in your mind of that essay, I kind of wanted to walk you through the writing process and give you some ideas about the different stages of writing. So, if you're already past these points or whatever, you can maybe just make some notes for your next writing process. So the second step actually, we've already discussed the first step of writing, which is understanding your project. You want to make sure you know what the expectations and goals of your essay are, and also who your audience or your reader is going to be. Then the next step after you've sort of got that general goal in mind is to brainstorm content. Brainstorming can be either really easy or really hard. Either you have great ideas, you know what you want to do, and within 30 seconds you have a nice list of all the points you want to make, or you're just totally stuck. So my best advice for brainstorming is don't self-edit, don't hold yourself back, just write whatever comes to mind. You don't have to include everything from your brainstorm list into your final paper. No one's going to see it. You can throw it away or burn it afterwards, so you don't have to be embarrassed. The point is just to get as many ideas out on the table as possible, and then you can pick and choose from that list as to what you think will be the strongest content. Yeah, you'll have the time to polish or edit later. So when I brainstorm, I usually write on paper, even though when I actually sit down to write the essay, I'll usually just, type it. I won't write it out longhand. But I find that brainstorming, just writing it down, kind of helps me to resist the urge to spell check and make sure that I have all my punctuation in there and make sure that the sentence sounds nice. You can just, kind of jot whatever down. So these are some ideas of things that you should think about including in a scholarship essay. So this can kind of help you brainstorm. What I recommend if you're really having a hard time thinking about content is to brainstorm ideas within each of these categories separately. So sit down first and say, okay, what are my life experiences? What have I done or seen or felt in my life that might be unique or interesting to a reader? So some examples I have here. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. Did you move around a lot as a kid? Did you grow up in a non-traditional household? Have you lived or traveled extensively abroad? Did you attend a small private school? Did you attend a really large inner city school? Do you have 10 brothers and sisters? Are you an only child? So all of these little things that might not feel or seem very interesting to actually have played a big impact in your life and make you very interesting. Secondly, what are your career goals? And how do the current activities that you're involved with play into those goals? That one hopefully will be a little bit easier to brainstorm, but maybe not. What are your academic interests? Just start with what's your major? Why have you chosen it? And again, don't worry about self-editing. Maybe just imagine that you're explaining to your friend why you decided to major in political science. And then diversity. Again, this is pretty specific for the Gilman Scholarship, but things that make you diverse or unique or interesting are always nice ideas to include in other essays as well. So, what is your racial, ethnic, or religious heritage? Do you have a disability or face unique challenges? Do you come from a historically underserved population? And that, again, is something that is language that the Gilman Scholarship uses a lot. So in this sense, they mean underserved in terms of learning abroad. But, depending on what your scholarship essay is for, it could be a different category. And then desired outcomes. What do you hope to achieve? Obviously, your immediate outcome for a scholarship essay is to get some money. But what are you going to use that money for? How is it going to change or impact your learning abroad experience? Is it going to enable you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise? And then more broadly, what do you hope to get out of your study abroad experience? And again, I have a longer blog post about, what to think about including in your essay to help you brainstorm. Okay. So now you not only know what you want to achieve with your essay, but you know kind of generally what you would like to include. So now we are going to start working on actually writing the thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about style, tone, and structure. I'll get into it. So what is style? People, will comment about writing style, but it sounds a lot of times very ambiguous, and it's kind of hard to understand what people mean. So just very basically, writing style is the way that you construct sentences or put groups of sentences together. Things like the words that you choose, the tone or the voice that you're using to, in your writing, your sentence structure, your sentence order, paragraph structure, all of these things combine to create your style. So back to that very first step in the writing process, determining your audience. This is very important when you're thinking about what kind of style to use. As I've put here in bold, style is subjective, which means that there's no such thing as a right style or a wrong style. There's no such thing as a good style or a bad style, but there is such a thing as appropriate style and effective style. And the best way to determine that is to really think hard about who is going to be reading your essay and even what situation they're going to be in when they're reading your essay. So, for example, the Gilman Scholarship. If you did a little research online, you would see that they get thousands and thousands of submissions and that they'll have 2 people sitting on a committee for your scholarship, and they will read. I sat on the committee this last summer. I read 90 essays, and I had a very short period of time to read them in. So thinking about that kind of situation, what sort of state of mind your reader is going to be in, will help you determine, how you want to approach your essay. I had some examples of this in my PowerPoint notes, which I can't see right now, but some examples of style that might work for one audience and not for another. If you're writing a paper for your biology professor or if you're writing a paper for your creative writing professor, obviously they're going to look for different things in the essay. They're going to want to see a different type of progression. They're going to want to see a different type of word choice. So again, it's subjective, but it's just important to, kind of think about who is going to be receiving your writing. One trick that I use, and I think a lot of people who do a lot of writing will do, is read your writing aloud to yourself. It can feel pretty silly, so I would say, do it by yourself. No one else has to hear, but it will actually really help you to hear and identify especially clumsy parts of your writing. So, if a word choice is just kind of off, or the sentence flow is a little bit off, or you'll feel if the paragraphs are really like jumping and you don't have smooth transitions, it's a lot easier to hear that than it is to see it on a page, especially with your own writing that you've been like staring at for hours, and in your mind it's perfect, so it's hard to see your own flaws, and reading them out loud helps. It also is vital, I think, to seek at least a second pair of eyes, if not more. You should never turn anything in without having someone else look at it. This helps just with small, typos and grammatical errors, but it also really does help with subject matter and tone and flow and all of these things. So, ask someone that you trust to give you honest feedback, and it doesn't have to be an expert. It doesn't have to be a writing instructor. It doesn't have to be an advisor. It could be your mom or your roommate, just someone who, is willing to spend a little bit of time to give you some honest feedback. And then just some general recommendations for scholarship essays as far as the tone and style goes. I recommend for scholarship essays to be very conscious of the tone that you're using. Most students either err on the side of being too casual. They use a lot of slang. They're very conversational in their essays, and that can kind of be a turnoff when someone's really looking for a polished presentation. Or they'll err on the opposite end and be just way too stiff. Every word is one that they, switched out with a thesaurus, and it just doesn't feel sincere. So you need to find a nice balance between those two. So my advice is to imagine that you were interviewing for a job. It's kind of the same sort of impression that you're trying to give. So you want to come off professional, you want to come off as prepared and things like that, but you don't want to feel stiff or fake or insincere or anything like that. So my best analogy would be an interview. And then word choice. A lot of times when people are having trouble coming up with ideas, or they're kind of just sort of encountering writer's block, they'll fall back on cliches, slang, overuse of qualifiers or prepositional phrases, things like that. So for your first draft, that's okay. For the first draft, it's nice just to be able to, get everything out, get kind of the general structure of your essay out, and then you can edit later. But while you're editing, definitely, watch for these sort of things and try to avoid them. And then make sure that you're using transitions and that your essay flows logically from one point to the next. So you don't want it to feel random or like someone cut it up and switch the order of the paragraphs around. They should not be able to do that. It should have a very precise order and should only make sense in one order. Okay, we probably don't have time for this, but I was hoping that we could kind of, look at some essay drafts and workshop them a little bit, so we don't need to worry about doing that right now. But as you are working on your essays, maybe if you have a buddy who's also working on one and you could switch, these are some nice things to look out for and to kind of get feedback on. So definitely you want to ask someone or even yourself to identify phrases or ideas that catch your eye in a good way, and make a quick note to identify why it's a strong point and why it should be in there. So when you're editing, it doesn't all have to be negative feedback. You definitely want to look for the parts of an essay that are working so that you can replicate that. Then another common sort of pitfall for students when they're just starting to write is like just briefly mentioning something that should be elaborated on further. A lot of times students will come up with really interesting points or really, kind of mention a very interesting characteristic, but that's all they'll do. They'll just kind of throw it out there and leave it for the reader to do, whatever with. So like I mentioned before, you want to make sure that everything that you're saying has a point and that point is spelled out for the reader. And then again, pay close attention to the flow of your essay. And this, I think, again, the easiest way to kind of identify spots that are awkward or hindering the flow is to read out loud. I think that's it. All right. If anyone has any questions or anything, that's all I have. You guys are welcome to submit drafts to me. This date was for the Gilman deadline, so if either of you are applying for a Gilman scholarship for the spring, you'll definitely want to send your essay to me this week so that I can return it to you in time for the deadline. This is my blog. Again, there's a lot of useful stuff up there. There's several more example essays and from different scholarships. And this is my email address. And Brittany, right here, will be replacing me as a scholarship advisor. So if, later in the semester or whatever, if you guys need help, then she will be the one to contact with questions.